Chicago, this city of hard work and caring people, is where Democrats will celebrate President Joe Biden and nominate Kamala Harris for President of the United States of America.
That is, of course, Let's Go Brandon. Let's Go Brandon Johnson, the former school teacher, principal, now radical left-wing extremist, anti-police, Democrat mayor of Chicago, Illinois, where the Democrats have gathered to plot the destruction of Western civilization. They're all in it together. That's when they say we're all in this together, they never explain in what. Do they? No, they don't. Well, happy Tuesday and welcome back. Chicago, Illinois. Poor Chicago, Illinois. All the Democrats are there. Over the weekend, 30 shootings, 5 homicides. Every one of them perpetrated by a Democrat, according to national crime statistics. And you know, if anybody had been wearing a MAGA hat, remember Juicy Smollett in Chicago, this MAGA country, and everybody laughed. And they brought a noose, sure they did, yeah. They were wearing MAGA hats, right, they were. 3 o'clock in the morning with an Arctic wind howling down Lake Michigan out of Canada. Nobody was on the street but Juicy Smollett. There are no Republicans in Chicago to commit crimes. Remarkable things going on there. Now, I have so many things to get to. I just want to jump right in. I really do. We remain at 888-630-9625. The New York Post, with a story in today's paper posted online last night. And the headline is, Chicago earns disturbing title of America's murder capital as DNC kicks off in the Dem-led Windy City. It is the Windy City. Ask Juicy Smollett and those two MAGA guys out on the street at what was that, 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock in the morning, when Juicy Smollett, he lied, just like Democrats lie. It seems that if Democrats are talking, Democrats are lying. The New York Post today, Democrat-led Chicago earned the disturbing title of America's murder capital. Listen now. For the 12th year running in 2023, as homicides have surged almost 50% from a decade ago, according to troubling data. At least 617 people were murdered across Chicago, where the Democratic National Convention kicked off Monday. In 2023, that's compared to a mere 416 people murdered in Chicago 10 years ago in 2013. Recent statistics from the research group wirepoints.org found. Now, that kill count put Chicago ahead of every city in the country for the 12th year in a row, beating out Philadelphia's 408 murders last year and New York City's 386 homicides. But per capita, that's better for New York because it's not just raw numbers. It's also per capita. You got to keep that in mind. It's a mathematical thing. But in terms of raw numbers, Chicago leads the way, and that might be why the Democrats chose that as their destination. And tens of thousands, the organizers claim 100,000 anti-Semite mobsters came into Chicago to descend on the city. They haven't committed massive violence yet, but there have been arrests, and they did tear down the fence, the barrier built around the United Center, where the Democratic National Convention is being held yesterday, in an obvious insurrectionist act. Now, the people in Chicago, and they have, what do they have so far this year in Chicago? I think they've got more than 250 homicides so far this year. Might help explain why people are fleeing the city like it's on fire again. Now, the number of homicides in Chicago did decline by about 13% from 2022. The Democrats always love to brag about these things. Hey, homicides are down this year. That's because last year was at a 100-year high. And, so many people were killed that there aren't as many murderers left around or people left to murder. And people are fleeing the city in large numbers as well. Amazing stuff. The number of homicides did decline about 13% from 2022 to 2023, fitting a national trend of year-on-year drops following a pandemic spike. That's another thing Joe Biden lied about last night. Oh, murders got to an all-time high under President Trump. Yeah, that was when you guys locked the country down and closed schools and closed businesses. And then a lot of Democrats ended up murdering a lot of people. Amazing stuff. However, the bloody tally is still 24% up compared to 2019. They always leave out these details. It's lies, damn lies, and statistics, before COVID-19 ravaged cities across the U.S., and the Democrats closed everything down, leaving everybody free, Democrats in particular, to go out and commit lots of crimes. So remarkable times. And Chicago, Illinois, they must be so proud. You know that they are. Yes, sir. And what's up with that? How's everything going in the schools in Chicago? We'll get to that coming up. Remarkable, just remarkable stuff. Democrats everywhere, and not a drop to drink. It's really something. All right, let's go to some audio from yesterday's festivities in Chicago, where things, again, over the weekend, how many shootings? 30. And how many homicides? 5. Well, it was a 2-day weekend after all. They did much more. When did they do much more? Over the 4th of July weekend, that's when they had the numbers were absolutely berserk, completely nuts, crazy. But you know how the Democrats are. Now, let's go to some audio here. I know that this year in Chicago, things are not going very well. In Washington, D.C. last year, we had a 25-year high in homicides. And that's okay with the Democrats. They're all right. And, I got to update you also on the D.C. City Council member who was arrested by the FBI day before yesterday, and why he was arrested and all that stuff. Crooks, Democrat crooks. You know how they are. They're crooked. So welcome to Chicago. Let's go to soundbite number 3, numero tres, as they say at the Democratic National Convention. Amazing. Now, I should, just because it's in front of me, I should mention this as well. The city of Chicago so far this year, this is according to the Chicago Tribune in 2024, they've had 364 people murdered. 364 people murdered so far this year. And looks like they're going to be number one for a 13th year running. Lucky 13. And why are people fleeing Chicago, Michael? Why are so many people fleeing Chicago? Let's go to number 3. Joe Biden last night talking about how great everything is under him because they really got the border under control.
Trump continues to lie about the border.
He's lying.
Here's what he won't tell you.
He's lying.
Trump killed the strongest bipartisan border deal in the history of the United States.
That's a lie. This is the bill that would lay judges on and enough Border Patrol agents to process people into the country by the millions. One Republican supported it, James Langford, in the Senate, and will eternally regret his decision to do so. President Trump opposed it along with every Republican on Capitol Hill because some of them actually read portions of it and discovered that there were billions and billions to just move illegal gang members into the country to attack your neighborhood and your daughter, and pay no attention to that. It was nothing like the strongest border protection bill. It was the opposite of that, just a giant lie. And he lied while accusing Trump of lying about it. Isn't that amazing? Just remarkable stuff. And then Joe Biden, after months and months of pressure because when he became president, he spent his first days undoing everything President Trump had done at the border, including 90-something executive orders. And Joe Biden laid on 90-something new executive orders, 94, I think, executive orders, opening up the border wide open, throwing the gates open. and opening our arms and our wallets because it's not their money. They're just buying criminals' votes. They're the Democrats. They're the left. And then, under pressure, finally Joe Biden reversed one or two of those executive orders, and it had a dramatic effect, even though he said, he can't do anything. Remember, we played the audio for you, Cringe and the other Democrats on the Hill and stuff. You see Nancy Pelosi cheering Joe Biden last night after undermining him. See that? They're such shameless, disgraceful people. But he undid a couple of his own executive orders, and it did bring some control back to the border about a month ago, a little over a month ago. And now he's bragging that he did something really great after, like the population of 5 different states were waved into the country illegally.
The result of the executive action I took, border encounters have dropped over 50%.
Could have done it day one.
There are fewer border crossings today than when Donald Trump left office.
That's a lie. That's a lie. That's I got to tell you, he lied so many times last night. Lies and lies and lies. Amazing stuff. And now he comes up with this crime thing, and I just referenced this. Crime did spike during COVID because of all the shutdowns across the country. People weren't going to work. People weren't going to school. People weren't earning money. And crime spiked because the Wuhan Red Death from Wuhan, China, at the Wuhan Institute of Virology, which got some funding from the U.S. tax dollars, from U.S. taxpayers, thanks to Anthony Fauci. And then the Wuhan caused havoc here and every place else around the world when it probably shouldn't have caused as much havoc as it did cause. Joe Biden using deceptive language on this one.
Trump continues to lie about crime in America.
As he lies.
Like everything else. Guess what?
Accuse you of lying.
On his watch,
while lying.
The murder rate went up 30%, the biggest increase in history. Now, the murder rate is falling faster than any time in history. Violent crime has dropped to the lowest level of more than 50 years. And crime will keep coming down. Yeah,
and crime will keep coming down because you guys have killed so many people. There aren't as many killers left on the street anymore. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, they're good people on both sides of the murder wave. It's true that crime is down after when people started returning to work and returning to school. That's true. But the spike is directly attributable to and attributed to the lockdowns, the shutdowns during the Wuhan Red Death period. And then he loves lying about the economy, too. And he loves lying about, and it's been fact-checked and debunked over and over again, how many millions of jobs he didn't create.
We've gone from economic crisis to the strongest economy in the entire world.
We've always been the strongest economy in the entire world.
16 million new jobs.
That's a lie.
Record
Debunked.
Small business growth. Record high stock market. Record high 401ks. Wages up and inflation down.
Wages up, not as much as inflation. Inflation is down now to the high of 9.1% under you. When you were inaugurated, it was 1.4% inflation. A couple of months before that, it was 1.2% inflation. Inflation started when you were elected before you were even inaugurated because you were threatening the economy, threatening the energy sector, and on and on. So the price of gasoline started to go up because you were threatening the oil industry and so on. And he lies, and he says 16 million jobs. That's been debunked again and again. Even left-wing radicals on CNN have shot that down. Well, that's just because people went back to work after the shutdowns of, come on, play along with me over here. That because people are going back to work after the Wuhan Red Death shutdowns. But no, he continues to lie about it while accusing you of lying about it. No sense of irony. It's good to be a Democrat, isn't it? And we hear this New York Times story today on Kamala. They've got a story on Kamala about her appearance last night. It's a humdinger. Let's go back to the phones. I I can't wait to get the New York Times story on Kamala Harris's pantsuit. It's a big and important article. Let's go to Paul calling from Cook County, Illinois, where we keep Chicago. Paul, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Don't tase me, bro. Hi, Chris.
Hey, what do you say?
I guess Trump was right. I was listening to a rival news station last night, and they were talking about the 1,000 GM car workers at the UAW are going to be laid off. 600 at the Warren plant in Michigan, and the reporter referred to it as a bloodletting. So I guess Trump was right. He termed it a bloodbath, and this reporter termed it a bloodletting.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Do you know what was the news organization?
It was CBS News last night.
Okay.
I had it on, and the reporter called it a bloodletting. And since Joe Biden walked on the picket line with the UAW workers, over 5,000 UAW auto workers have been laid off, and Joe Biden hasn't lifted a finger.
He bragged last night about being the first president ever to walk on a picket line.
Yeah.
Wow.
So, Chris, I hope that if Trump gets elected, he can help our auto workers and get them back to work and get rid of all these mandates and subsidies and let them build the cars that Americans want to buy.
You mean free market capitalism?
Yeah, something like that.
That'd never work. I watched the convention last night. I know that could never work. That I saw Kamala's got fixes. She's going to tell companies what they can charge for things and what they have to make more of. Isn't that amazing? Yeah, President Trump, Biden attacked Trump last night for the old bloodbath thing. And yeah, he was talking about, of course, the economy and in particular the automobile industry. But the news media, I don't know if you picked up on this, Paulo, but the news media is kind of corrupt. Have you noticed that?
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. It's hard to get straight news.
Sure
and
is.
That's why we turn to you every day, Chris.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks so much. That's why I turn to me every day, too. What's more corrupt, the Democrat Party or the news media? Or do I repeat myself? Honestly, people. Now, here's the funny story from the people at the New York Times. They are a Democrat Party front group, of course, and they've got the headline, Kamala Harris's tan suit surprise. Tan suit surprise. Is that like a popcorn surprise? How is that a surprise? Why is that a surprise? That doesn't surprise me very much at all. The Democratic candidate for president made an unexpected appearance on day one of the party convention. It was unexpected, and that's why her tan suit was quite a shock. And she came out and they played Beyonce. Is that right? They played Beyonce on music, and everybody cheered because they like Beyonce and they have the brains of 4-year-olds. When Kamala Harris, the Democratic nominee for president, took the stage on Monday night on day one of the Democratic National Convention, it was surprising for 2 reasons. First, that she had popped up to speak at all, rather than simply waiting her official turn to accept the party's official nomination. It's very official. Got 2 officials and just a few words there. Official nomination on a Thursday, which is an official day of the week. And taking her seat as guest of honor alongside her vice presidential pick, Governor Tim Walz, and their families. They had the tattooed Bergen-Belsen girl, the stepdaughter of Kamala Harris, with all of her tattoos in full glory, wearing a camouflage baseball cap, because she's keeping it classy. And Governor Tim Walz, as the Great Walls of China. They call them the Great Walls of China. Just see the article that came out yesterday about a guy who traveled to China with Tim Walz and says he's a total Maoist. Says Tim Walz is a total Maoist. A guy who spent time in China and traveling China with Tim Walz calls him a total Maoist. Chairman Mao, the leader of the Chinese Communist Party, they murdered 50 million people to 75 million people in communist China to bring about utopia, which they like so much. But I digress. The New York Times said take a seat next to the guest of honor and Governor Tim Walz, who puts tampons in the boys' rooms in schools in Minnesota, let the city of Minneapolis burn while his wife enjoyed the smells of the burning businesses wafting in through her bedroom window at night in their $1 million white clapboard house. I've seen pictures of it. It's a nice-looking Minnesota house. It is. And they all do very well in government, don't they, with these salaries that don't quite get you there. And second, the New York Times continues, that she had popped up. It's the second time she popped up to speak, albeit briefly and in praise of President Biden, while wearing a tan suit. You remember when they became orgasmic over Barack Obama wearing a tan suit years ago? He was president, and Barack Obama showed up wearing a tan suit. The news media and the New York Times, they become aroused when they see a tan suit. That's kind of peculiar, I think. So the story continues. And second, that she popped up to speak, albeit briefly, in praise of President Biden while wearing a tan suit. The next paragraph is, a tan suit, exclamation mark. That's it. It is good to be a Democrat in today's North Korea. United States of America. After all, there are few garments less likely to show up at the public performances that are major party presidential conventions. Really? It's that unusual, is it? I don't think it's that unusual. But they say the unusual dress code is one of the straightforward red, white, and blue. You notice that somebody brought American flags. I think they're brand new because they still have the creases in them. They must have handed them out because you recall when Hillary Clinton had her nominating convention in Philadelphia, the entire convention hall was bereft of American flags. There was not a single American flag, and they had to go down, according to news reports, to City Hall in Philadelphia and steal the American flag bunting off of the building to bring it to the convention center because every filthy, rotten, unpatriotic Democrat forgot that it was an American political event and they failed to bring American flags. I wonder if any of them wore tan suits. Just amazing. Yeah, the New York Times, they're having a sexual episode here. The unusual dress code is one of straightforward red, white, and blue. The usual dress code is one of red, white, and blue, but that's not true. Suits and ties, dresses, they don't really wear dresses for the most part, they're Democrats. Skirt suits. The point is patriotism in the most obvious sense. Yeah, when you're faking it, then that's what happens. That has been known to happen. The last time a tan suit made political waves, it was also in late August. Listen to this now. I'm ahead of my time. I had not read this far into the story. And the person wearing it was President Barack Obama. The occasion was a news conference on Iraq and Syria, but the response from a large swath of the watching public was shock! Exclamation point. Horror! Exclamation mark. I can't believe it. At the outfit, Peter King, the Republican congressman from New York, said he thought the suit was a metaphor for his lack of seriousness. Lou Dobbs of the Fox News Channel called it unpresidential. They're still having a weddy party because people mocked, and here's a picture of Barack Obama wearing his tan suit, and now Kamala shows up wearing a tan suit, and they couldn't be more elated. They're aroused. These people, the New York Times, the news media, The filthiest, most corrupt institution in America. Man, oh man. That's a big story in the New York Times, a tan suit. They're very excited that she wore a tan suit. I'm wearing black jeans. Do you think that'd go over pretty big? I've got a plaid kind of checked fleecy shirt on. It's Brooks Brothers. Because it was cold out today. I went out on my balcony this morning and it was 60 degrees. I get up early, but it was 60 degrees. And the weather is changed. It's definitely climate change. I'm telling you. Now, is there any organization that wears tan suits, any company or organization that wears, or just like the Iraqi army? Maybe they're trying to do the Iraqi army thing. Yeah, and since I mentioned it, I'll go to this. From Alpha News, man who says he accompanied Walz on trip to China calls VP candidate, quote, Maoist to the core. The former student also told Alpha News that he submitted a report with the House Oversight Committee and spoke to a staffer for Representative James Comer, investigating this commie wimp that the Democrats have chosen to be the VP running mate. A man who says he joined Tim Walz on a trip to communist China is speaking out about his experience of traveling to the country with the future vice presidential candidate. It was almost a daily revelation of how much he adores the communist regime, the former student told Alpha News. For over a decade, Tim Walz traveled to and from China, first arriving in the country in 1989. Walz taught at a high school in partnership with a nonprofit program affiliated with Harvard University. They were getting into bed with China way back then. They've been in bed with communist China for a long time, Harvard. Tim Walz was not going to Harvard, but somehow he got into bed with Harvard and communist China. During his first trip, Walz was visiting Hong Kong when the Tiananmen Square protests began in April. Those protests ended in June when the communist government massacred thousands of protesters, June 3rd and 4th, 1989. After the massacre, Walz later took a train to Beijing to visit the square, according to the New York Times. Upon returning to the United States after that first trip, Walz told local newspaper how much he enjoyed his time in China. Never mind that Tiananmen Square massacre thing. On June 4th of 1994, Walz married Gwen Whipple on the 5th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. Gwen Whipple told a local newspaper that Walz wanted to have a date he'll always remember. Sure, Pearl Harbor wasn't good enough. He wanted to have the Tiananmen Square massacre as his wedding anniversary, so they did that. They spent their honeymoon in communist China, too. Now, the man who traveled with him, a former student, said he joined Walz 1995 and went to China. Speaking to Alpha News about his experience, the student Shad, S-H-A-D, asked that they not use his last name because he's afraid the FBI will come knock his door down or something. But for several weeks, Walz and his group of students explored China together. The summer of 1995, Shad said they saw Tiananmen Square, walked along the Great Wall of China, and traversed the country. However, he says there is no doubt that he's a true believer. Shad said of Walz, I've been trying to tell people this for 30 years. Nobody wanted to listen. At night, we'd go out. He'd walk the street fairs. We'd buy souvenirs. And Tim was always buying the Little Red Book. Now, that's Chairman Mao's Little Red Book on why communism is so great and why you should murder tens of millions of people. He said he gave them as gifts. I saw him buy at least a dozen on the trip, a dozen Little Red Books, Chairman Mao's Little Red Book. I had one in college because I had college professors, and they, too, thought that communism was really great because the subway in Moscow was nice and there was no graffiti. There was no graffiti. I had a political science professor tell me after coming home from Moscow how great the Moscow subways were, and he was elated when he said, "There's no graffiti." And I said, "That's because they can't get spray paint." That's what I said, right? I was like 20 years old. And he did not think that was humorous at all. He grimaced. And, that's what you get, the stuff. He says, Shad says, it would be like being in Germany and buying copies of Mein Kampf, He's Maoist to the core, and he should not be underestimated, said Shad, who knows him.
For one thing, don't ever shy away from our progressive values. One person's socialism is another person's neighborliness.
That's right. That's him. That's the vice presidential running mate, and he's a Maoist to the core, and he should not be underestimated, said Shad, who traveled around communist China with him. Shad drew attention to the similarities between the messaging of Walz and Kamala Harris, including phrases like the politics of joy and unburdened by what has been, and the propaganda materials used by Mao. Now, I actually did some research on this yesterday when I read this and found that the language is very similar to Karl Marx, and the communists in China, of course, adopted Karl Marx and all that stuff. And it is very Marxist, this unburdened by what has been and the politics of joy, very communistic. It really is. People need to have their eyes wide open, Shad said. The snitch hotline in Minnesota, which Governor Tim Walz instituted, you were supposed to call and narc out your neighbors if they were violating social distancing rules and things like that. Isn't that amazing? So that's kind of a fascinating little story, isn't it? Yes, it is. And good for Shad, who's afraid to have his last name out there because, not just the government, but so many crazy Democrats and everything. A good piece in Alpha News, a fun piece. Also, speaking of Walz, the Washington Post has a fact check today. Walz's false claim that J.D. Vance never voted for any pro-worker bills. Worker bills, using communist terminology. They love that workers stuff. I call people employees or taxpayers or citizens, or they call them workers because that's what the language that the communists use. Walz relies on a dubious metric, the Washington Post says. So Walz is going around saying that never voted for any pro-worker legislation, J.D. Vance, as senator. And the Pinocchio test, they gave him 4 Pinocchios for that. So Tim Walz gets 4 Pinocchios. Tim Walz gets 4 Pinocchios from the Washington Post, a left-wing Democrat Party front group, the Washington Post, owned by one of the richest men in the history of the world, and Glenn Kessler himself, the chief fake checker, gave Tim Walz 4 Pinocchios for lying about J.D. Vance and his voting record, which is, of course, easily checked. But you know how communists just lie about everything and they could care less. Let's go back to the telephones. Let's go to Ivan, calling from Miramar Beach, Florida. Beautiful Miramar Beach. Ivan, you're on the Chris Plant Show.
Hey, good morning, Chris. I'll try to be quick. Hey, Chris, Biden said crime was down. The only reason why crime is down is because, number one, they don't arrest. Number two, they don't prosecute. Number three, they don't report. And then when they do arrest them, they let them go through. They let them go back on the street. That's why the crime is down. And listen, Chris, I got 2 choices for you. I'll need you to pick for me which one you think is the best. Kamala, for obvious reasons, or Kobamala. Kobamala is another black senator that hasn't run anything. Which one would you select?
Kobamala or
Kamala.
Kamala is more lyrical, I think. I think it lends itself to song and to rhymes. Kamala. And give me the other one again.
Kobamala.
Kobamala, because Obama's behind the curtain. Obama's hand is up her pantsuit. It's a tan. I don't know if you heard about her tan pantsuit. It's the most spectacular tan pantsuit since Barack Obama wore one years ago. The New York Times. Yeah.
Chris, listen, I'll be real quick. I got 3 commercials. I don't know why they're not running. They ought to hire you to run their commercials. They run a commercial, say they think you forgot. They think you forgot the 15 to 20 million illegals, the forced vaccinations, the crime, the drugs, the men competing in women's sports. They'll force you to buy a $60,000 vehicle. They think you forgot. And tell them at the end of the commercial, tell them we won't forget when it comes time to vote this time. And then another variation of the same thing, Chris, is that they think, Joe and Kamala, they think they can lie to you and tell you a man can have a baby, and you'll believe it. They can stop hurricanes, and you'll believe it. They have 59 genders, and you'll believe it. They can think that the 15 to 20 million illegals have come across the border, and that they're going to fix it, and they think you'll believe it. They think they can tell you they'll stop drug deaths and crimes in your neighborhood, and they think you'll believe it. They think that you'll believe that they're going to stop. They're going to allow fracking, and then they think that they can tell you it's all Donald Trump's fault, and that you'll believe it. And if they think you're stupid and you'll believe anything, tell them this time they're wrong. And the last one, Chris, is the same. Another variation of this same thing is Joe Biden and Kamala. They've spent $7 trillion the last 3.5 years. How is it they have not fixed crime in your neighborhood? How is it they've not fixed your school literacy rates?
I've got something on that coming up, too, out of Chicago, Ivan. And you're right. Here's the thing. The Democrats do believe it all. They believe whatever they're told.